Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another study of this week's portion. This week, we studied a portion of Korach. Korach was a cousin of Moshe and Aaron. He came from the tribe of Levi, and he rebelled. He figured that Moshe may be doing appointments on his own without God's consent. And he figured that there is a room for him to be a leader instead of Aaron, Moshe's brother. He rebelled not far by himself, but he was able to assemble 250 leaders, family leaders, as well as a bunch of many other community members to join together in a revolt. We know the end of the story. I hope everyone is familiar with the story. Moshe is pleading with them to stop. Moshe is asking to delay, and he's taking his time for a day so that they have a time to think. And yet they refuse. At that moment, Moshe becomes angry, and he turned to God, and he's asking God not to forgive them, but rather to punish them in a very harsh way, in an unusual way, so no one should ever doubt about their misconduct. And as soon as he finished speaking, the earth opens itself up and swallowed Korach and his family, and then a fire came from above and consumed the 250 men who rebelled with Korach, and everybody got scared. And then we read about other incidents where God wants to prove that Aaron is chosen to be the priest to serve God by asking each tribe to appoint a leader to place their cane, their staff, in the temple next to the altar overnight. And in the morning, the one that will blossom and produce fruits is the one miraculously, is the one that God chose. Aaron's staff was Moshe commanded Aaron to put his staff and write his name on it, like every other leader of a tribe. And in the morning, Aaron's staff, which was a dry cane, was able to produce leaves, flowers, and blossom. And in addition, it produced almonds. And Moshe took out his staff, showed it to the Jewish people, and they realized that God has chosen Aaron to lead, and it's not Moshe's appointment. This is the main thrust of this week's portion. So I would like to take some basics and delve into, which I think has a lot of gems. The first is, the name of the portion is Korach. If you want to know why the portion is named after Korach, you can find my talk. I have a short 3.5-minute talk about the name of this week's portion. But I want to show it you something else. And the following is based on Kabbalah. Those of us who read or recognize the Hebrew alphabet will be able to appreciate it even more. The word Korach are made out of 3 letters. Kuf, Resh, am I holding it opposite? Yeah. Kuf, Resh, and Chet. Like this. Korach, Kuf, Resh, and letter Chet. According to Kabbalah, the reason that Korach rebelled is it comes immediately after the story of the spies. The spies refused to enter the Holy Land. One of the reasons were because they refused to depart the spiritual realm they were holding by, whereby they were receiving all their sustenance directly from God through the manna, the quail, the cloud, the pillar of cloud that protected them and provided the safe journey, and all their needs were met without toil and hardship. Entering the Holy Land changes their whole dynamic, and now to put food on their table It means they have to toil and compete and work very hard and not always succeed. And that's the way to serve God. God wants us to toil and sweat. God wants us to walk the land. God wants us to do business with strangers. God wants us to use our talent to convince people and to deal in honesty in business. When they saw the way the Holy Land is working out, where there are no miracles, and as we call it, in the realm of action, action will produce no good intention, no prayers, no study will get you bread on the table. They refused to enter, and they decided it's better to stay in the comfort of godliness in the desert. Says the Kabbalah that Korach, upon seeing that action is what counts because God punished them for refusing to enter the Holy Land. Korach then comes to Moshe and he said, if it's about prayer and spirituality, then there is room for you to be above me, because perhaps you comprehend godliness and the Torah deeper than I do. Perhaps you are able to concentrate longer when you pray, so you are closer to God. But after all, the spy's story teaches us that action is what God's desire. When it comes to action, we are all equal. There is no better or worse. As long as you follow the manual, you can put together the project. If you buy from IKEA a table or a closet cabinet, and you get the instructions and you can read the instructions and you have the tools, it doesn't matter who did it, a professor, a student, or someone who is very, very tired. As long as they follow the instructions, they will achieve their goal. How come there are different standings or status among Jews where some are closer to God and some are not? Says the Rebbe, Korach's mistake, similar to the spies, was that he took the other extreme. The spies' mistake was they figured only spirituality matters and I don't want to do action. Korach's mistake is he took to the other spectrum, to the opposite direction, to the polar opposite, where only action is what counts, and that's why he had the audacity to fight Moshe and Aaron. But in reality, God wants us to combine both. He wants us to have action. However, the action is counted and important so long as it leads to spiritual elevation. So of course, between the two, action is more important. However, at the end of the day, spirituality is the motivation for action and should be affected by the action. So one who is totally separating the action from spirituality misses the entire point. And this is what we are going to see in the name of Korach. Korach is made out of three letters, Kuf, Resh, and Chet. If you look very carefully, if you study the Kabbalah, you will find that God created the world with the letter Hey. Hey is the letter that created the universe, because it's a letter that has no sound. It's just the blowing of air, just like God spoke and said, let there. Hey is a blowing of a sound. Kabbalah begins in the book of creation, that the creation of the universe was created with the letter Hey. Here is the letter Hey, and I want to explain to you how Kabbalah looks at that letter. The letter Hey is made out of three lines: the top, the roof, the right side, and then the left side, with a total separation between the two. And all three lines represent thought, speech, action. The thought and speech are represented by spirituality. Action is represented by the small line. In other words, think twice, as handyman said. Good handyman will say, measure twice, cut once. Before you do something, this line, there should be at least twice or three times as much contemplating, preparing, and making sure you don't make mistakes. You got to think, you got to speak about it or write it down. You got to make sure you have a very good clarity how to perform and how to act. And only then you do the action. The action is much smaller compared to the energy you invested in thought and speech. This is the way the universe works. That's the proper way to run the universe. Korach, Kuf, Resh, and Chet are a total distortion of the letter Hey. Here you have the letter Kuf. Here you have the letter Resh. Here you have the letter Chet. Very, very briefly. Kuf, the first letter of the name of Korach, has too much action. Action is pulling down, meaning you want to concentrate on more of action without affecting spirituality. You are willing to follow the rules, but it should not affect your mind, your intellect, and your emotions because you're busy doing too much of it. And that's not right. That's one distortion. The second letter of Korach is Resh. Resh is missing action altogether. It's all about intellect. It's all about the thought and the speech. Hey should have an action. This is a letter that misses action, and someone who says, I only want to concentrate on spirituality and my emotions, but it should not affect my behavior, the way I conduct myself. And the letter Chet is the action. That part is totally connected to the other two, meaning he feels that the action should dictate his spirituality without spirituality first dictating how to conduct himself. So he does what he wants, he does behave the way he likes and he feels comfortable, and only then he puts his mind to justify it and to explain and to rationalize and to feel based on the way he acts. Thus, the name of Korach is a distortion of the order God is creating us in the universe. The proper way is Hey, where you have a lot of thought first, a lot of speech, meaning a lot of prep time, a lot of concentration of how and what's right, learning, discussing, and memorizing, and only then you do the action, you follow God's way. That's why, says the Rebbe, the name Korach denotes his faults, his issues which were not combining action with spirituality in the proper measure, either too much spirituality and no action, or too much action and no spirituality, or there is action, but action dictates spirituality. In other words, reversing the order, which is inappropriate. And that's why Korach was punished and he was wiped down from the face of the earth. I want to move on to the next topic. Chapter 16, verse 15 in the Chumash that we study. You may find it on page 971. We read about Moshe trying to delay by pushing them to think before they act and wait until the next day. In the morning, he goes over to them to try and make peace again, even though they were rebelling and taking it personally against them. Yet he felt that for the sake of the peace, he should humble himself. After he goes and tries to convince them, they turn their back to him and they refuse to even to listen to hear what he has to say. At that point, we read in verse 15, Moshe is very angry. And let's read the text, what he says, and see how we can explain it. Moshe was extremely upset. This is very Moshe was extremely upset. He said to God, don't turn to their gift offering. I have not taken a donkey from a single one of them, and I have not wronged a single one of them. Moshe was extremely upset, is extremely rare. I don't know if there is any other place in the Torah where Moshe is extremely upset. That's number one. Number two, he turned to God and he tells him what to do. And what he says to him is, don't turn to the gift offering. What does that mean, don't turn to the gift offering? We have Rashi who gives us two explanations. One, Rashi said, they brought a incense to God in the altar. Do not turn to it and punish them for doing a service which is forbidden for anyone other than Aaron. We all are aware, hopefully you remember Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's two sons, who brought in a strange fire, meaning they brought incense on the golden altar, and God took them away by a fire that consumed them. Moshe turned to God and says, they are doing the same thing. They are bringing a forbidden fire by bringing a incense on the golden altar. Do not turn to the gift and punish them in a very severe way. That's one. The second one, Rashi says, is every single day there are two communal offerings brought on the altar on behalf of the entire Jewish people. The purpose of the offerings is to atone for the people's sins. And therefore, God says, these men have a part in a communal offering. If their part will be accepted by you, they will be atoned for what the sins they just committed. Please do not accept that part. Let that part not be consumed on the altar, not be accepted as an offering, so that they should be severely punished. The Lubavitch Rebbe says very briefly, without getting into all the questions that are involved here, that Moshe was feared that the people might think that their punishment is only for bringing a strange fire when it's forbidden. But in reality, the punishment is supposed to come about rebelling against Moshe, because leadership is of the utmost importance, as the entire Torah portion of this week is dedicated to. That's why Rashi said he's asking God not just to punish them in a severe way, but to punish them in a way that everyone can see that the reason they are being punished is not just ordinarily disobeying God, but in a way of disobeying and revolting against a leader, which deserve an unusual punishment. That's why Rashi brings the two explanations, because Rashi wants to tell him, if you kill them in a natural way, people might compare them to Nadav and Avihu, who brought a strange fire when they don't supposed to. But if you punish them in an unusual way, everybody will know how wicked they are, and how rebelling or revolting against a leader appointed by God is totally unacceptable and will not be atoned in any way, shape, or form. If we move on, the next page, 973, and chapter 16, verse 22, we see something very similar before the punishment befalls upon Korach and his group. Chapter 23, I'm going to read and then share with you Rashi's example. Chapter 23, verse 23 on page 973, God spoke to Moshe. Verse 22. Moshe, God spoke to Moshe. I'm reading 21, so we understand 22. God spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, disassociate yourself from the congregation, and I'll destroy them in an instant. They, meaning Moshe and Aaron, fell on their faces and said, O merciful God, God who knows everybody's thoughts, just because one man sins, should you be angry with the whole congregation? God is warning Moshe and Aaron to remove themselves from their revolting camp, so he can destroy them in one instance, as it happened actually. However, Moshe and Aaron fall on their faces and they turn to God and they say, if one man sin, why do you punish the entire congregation? Rashi gives us a parable that explains what Moshe was telling God. Rashi says that Moshe told God, in an ordinary kingdom, when a community or a city or a town rebelled and revolted against a king, the king doesn't know who is righteous and who is wicked, and therefore he destroys the entire town because he knows some of them are bad people who deserve to be punished. But you, God, Moshe says to God, you know what's in a person's heart, and you know who deserves to die and who's not. So how is it possible that you say that you're going to kill the entire community? Shouldn't the righteous people be spared? Aren't you be able to tell if someone deserves to die or not? Why are you about to destroy them all? And God, says Rashi, turned to Moshe and said, you are right, I will kill only the people who deserve to die. The Rebbe points out that Moshe is trying to minimize the damage. He turned to God and he says that there are two camps within the revolting camp. There is one man who incites everybody the entire night. As we read in the text, the entire night Korach goes around, gathers people, and he tells them, do you think I do it for myself? I don't do it for myself, I do it for you. I would like you to be able to be appointed. I would like you to have an opportunity to be elected. It's not just for me. Everyone will benefit if we can get rid of Moshe and Aaron. In the morning, we find that there was a very large group, hundreds of men, who gathered to revolt against Moshe. Moshe turned to God and said, of course, they all deserve to be punished because they're rebelling against the leadership. However, there is a very clear distinction between one man, which is Korach, the insider, the one who started everything, and the rest of the people who are they are becoming corrupt now through Korach, but they did not incite, and they are not the one to be punished equally to Korach. And he says to God, you know people's minds and hearts, and you can tell who was pulled in without thinking who was pulled in, just because he heard few fancy words versus those people who are the inciters, those who started it all, those who are able to bring more people into the revolt. And God turned to him and he said, of course you're right, but it's not one sinner, it's more. It's Datan and Aviram. There are a few more. If we read immediately thereafter, we can see that that's exactly what happened. The earth swallowed only Korach and his family. The 250 leaders did not die by being swallowed by the fire that came and consumed them. In other words, and actually a fire consumed Korach also while he was swallowed. Most people didn't die by being swallowed. It's only Korach and his family and Datan and Aviram because they were the inciters. The rest of the people who followed suit were punished in a much different way. Obviously, they died, they were punished, but in comparison, relative to Korach and Datan and Aviram, which a much lighter sentence, and thus the people, the rest of the community was able to see that God knew exactly who acted and why, and the way and why they were punished in a certain way. I want to move on to one more, and that is about the blossoming of the staff of the cane of Aaron on page 979. So again, I shared with you before. After the event took place, God orders Moshe to collect a staff, a cane, from each of the tribe's leaders, including Aaron's, and he should place Aaron's cane right in the middle, And the one cane that will blossom and produce fruits is the one whom God chose to be representing the Jewish people. In the morning, here is the text, what happened in the morning. I'm reading on page 979, chapter 17, verse 23. And the following day, after the canes were in the temple, and the following day, Moshe came to the tent of testimony, and look, Aaron's staff of the house of Levi had blossomed. It had blossomed, started to produce fruit, and developed ripe almonds. Moshe took out all the staffs from before God to the children of Israel. They saw what had happened, and they each man took his staff back. So we see here that Moshe is proving to the Jewish people that Aaron is chosen by God. How was the proof made? So if you read, the text tells us it blossomed, meaning it produced fruits, flowers, it produced fruit, and it grew almonds. The question that all the commentators have is that, of course, it was a miracle that a dry cane is able to produce a fruit, but the process is usually that flowers, a blossom flowers, after which the flowers fall and it ripens into a fruit and becomes an almond. Once it becomes an almond, the fruits, the flower are all gone for a long time. How is it the Torah describes that the cane had flowers and blossomed to a fruit and produced almonds? It's just does not make sense. Here are 4 explanations, and then we'll see how the Rebbe explains. We don't have time. So here are 4 explanations. Rashi says the flowers fell off. There were flowers coming from the cane, but they fell on the ground. And the cane produced almonds. Rashbam says that if there were flowers, there were no almonds. Therefore, says the Rashbam, there were only flowers, but by the time he took it to show it to the children of Israel, suddenly it blossomed to produce the fruit, the almonds. So the Jewish people saw it with flowers, and then they saw how immediately it changes to have almonds. That Zekanim says there were 2. There were some flowers and some flowers that already produce almonds. So there were 2 types of scenes on the same cane. They saw flowers and they saw almonds. Abarbanel says that there was a second miracle. Usually the flower fall and then the almond comes out. Here the miracle was there were flower and the almond grew out of the flower, but the flower did not fall. The Rebbe very briefly explains that Rashi is of the opinion that the flower fell on the ground and Moshe took it with him, with the cane, and he showed him the flowers that fell and the almonds that came out of the flowers, because he wanted the process to be a little bit in a natural, albeit very, very speedy, but it should follow a natural way, even though the entire process was a miracle, but part of it must be naturally done so that it produces, the cane produces leaves and flowers, and the flowers blossom into almonds. While they become almonds, they fall down. And the reason is because God wanted to teach the Jewish people that Aaron was chosen to lead as a leader of the tribe of Levi, not just among the rest of the community from the other canes, but also within the tribe itself. He is the most fitting because naturally he deserved to be representing the entire tribe. Because after all, the dispute between Korach and Moshe and Aaron was an internal war between the tribe of Levi. The 12 canes that were placed overnight is a proof between the rest of the tribes versus Levi tribe, that Levi tribe is the leader. Yet, within the Levi tribe, we still are not sure if Aaron is the best choice. Perhaps he's the default, being the brother of Moshe. Perhaps Moshe prayed for him. But there could be someone who is better suited. Perhaps someone is equal to Aaron. That's why, says Rashi, that the flowers fell, meaning the process by which the almonds came out was all natural, again, albeit in a very quick way, because to tell us that within the tribe of Levi, don't worry about who should be appointed, that belongs to Aaron, because he's the one naturally fitting to lead. So in that way, God answered both. The rest of the community, the entire 12 tribes, they saw that the Levi tribe is chosen to lead. And within the Levi tribe, they all realized that Aaron was chosen for his own merit and his own behavior because he deserved, not because he's Moshe's brother. And despite the fact that he participated in the golden calf, yet he deserved to be the leader as God created the miracle that part of it should be a natural one, representing Aaron's natural traits. I would like to conclude here and thank you very much for joining the class. And I hope to see you again either at synagogue or Saturday night, 9:15. We'll have Abdallah service on Zoom and live. We also will have a Monday morning Talmud class. Of course, those of us who do not attend services every morning are invited to join the virtual minyan starting at 7:50. And at the email, you can find the links. Shabbat
Okay.
Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat